The chamber was already humming with restless energy, a low current of whispers and camera clicks that never quite settled. Then came the spark. Jasmine Crockett leaned toward the microphone, her eyes steady, her voice velvet-wrapped steel. One line, sharp as a blade, bright as a flare, cut through the stale air. For a heartbeat, the room forgot how to breathe. Reporters froze mid-keystroke, lenses locked on her face. A single cough echoed like a firecracker. Then the silence deepened, heavier than any shout. Across the aisle, Kash Patel's grin faltered, the practiced confidence in his posture turning to stone. Someone in the back whispered, "Did you hear that?" Another voice, higher, startled, answered, "She really said it." The crowd erupted. Gasps first, then a surge of cheers that spilled against the marble walls like a sudden storm. Phones shot skyward, screens glowing as they captured the moment already destined for millions of timelines. A young aide clapped her hand over her mouth, eyes wide. Even the stern-faced committee chair blinked, as if jolted awake. Crockett didn't move. She let the noise swell around her, a calm center in a whirlwind of disbelief and delight. Her words, simple, undeniable, hung in the air, impossible to retract, impossible to ignore. Patel shifted in his seat, a half-formed retort dying on his tongue. The cameras loved the hesitation, zooming in on every flicker of doubt across his face. Outside the hearing room, the echo was instant. Tweets fired off like fireworks, news alerts buzzed in pockets, hashtags began to bloom before the applause even faded. This was no ordinary exchange. It was a flashpoint, a collision of truth and bravado that cracked open the day. The crowd knew it, the nation watching live knew it, and Patel, jaw tight, eyes darting, surely knew it most of all. But this jaw-dropping flashpoint was hours in the making, born of tensions that had been building long before the cameras rolled, fueled by rival histories and an unspoken dare that neither side could ignore. And as the cheers slowly ebbed to a charged hush, the real story, the one that would ripple far beyond these walls, was only just beginning. Hours before the lightning strike of that one line, the chamber already carried the scent of something historic. It was the kind of morning when the air feels charged long before the first gavel falls, when every shuffle of paper and distant footstep echoes like a drum roll. Staffers hurried between rows with clipboards clutched tight, their eyes betraying a nervous anticipation. Outside, a slow-moving line of citizens pressed against security ropes, eager to witness a reckoning they felt had been too long deferred. This wasn't just another committee meeting. It was a crucible for the very idea of accountability. At stake was more than partisan bragging rights. The hearing promised a rare public test of whether truth could still stand taller than spin in a country where disinformation spreads faster than the morning headlines. Viewers at home knew it. The crowd in the gallery felt it in their bones. If the nation's leaders couldn't draw a line here, if facts could be smothered under swagger, what hope remained for democratic norms that had already been stretched thin? Enter Kash Patel, the man many had come to see as the embodiment of that swagger. His reputation preceded him, former Trump aide turned media regular, fluent in the art of the evasive soundbite. He strode in with the ease of someone who believed cameras were old friends, his tailored suit catching every flash like armor. A faint smile played at the corners of his mouth, as if he'd arrived not to testify, but to perform. Whispers rippled through the crowd, stories of his past confrontations with investigators, his talent for sidestepping questions with a practiced charm. Across the dais, Jasmine Crockett waited with quiet focus. Unlike Patel, she had no taste for theatrics. Her calm presence was a contrast that sharpened every movement. Where he exuded calculated confidence, she radiated resolve. She knew that today wasn't about winning a headline. It was about proving that truth still mattered. For those in the chamber who had grown weary of endless spin, her steady gaze was a promise that someone was listening, someone ready to hold the line. As the hearing commenced, tension threaded through every exchange. Patel's answers were polished to a sheen, Each response a careful sidestep dressed as cooperation. He smiled when pressed, deflected when cornered, always leaving just enough ambiguity to keep the untrained eye guessing. To some in the audience, it was infuriating, a dance of words that mocked the seriousness of the moment. To others, it was sport, a performance designed to outwit the system. But beneath the surface, small fissures began to show. Each time Crockett leaned in with a precise question, a flicker of impatience crossed Patel's eyes. The crowd leaned forward, sensing the shift. They weren't just spectators, they were witnesses to a high-stakes duel between accountability and audacity. The nation's credibility, fragile and frayed, felt suddenly tangible, something that could be defended or squandered in the space of a few exchanges. The atmosphere thickened with every pause, every clipped answer. Even the marble walls seemed to hold their breath. This was no mere political theater. It was a test of whether truth could still pierce through performance, whether dignity could outlast bravado. And behind Patel's polished confidence lay contradictions waiting to ignite. Long before the hearing lights glared against his tailored suit, Kash Patel had built a career on the thrill of proximity to power. He wasn't born into Washington's inner circle, he muscled his way there, a former public defender who traded the grind of courtrooms for the sharper glow of national security politics. Friends from those early days remember a man quick with a joke and quicker with ambition, a strategist who could read a room and seize an opportunity before others even spotted it. His ascent accelerated during the tumultuous years of the Trump administration. Patel first surfaced on Capitol Hill as a staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, where he became known for a knack at turning dry oversight hearings into headline fodder. It was here that he learned the power of narrative, how a carefully phrased memo or a selective leak could shift the story overnight. Allies called him resourceful. Critics called him reckless. Either way, the name Kash Patel began to circulate beyond committee walls. When the White House took notice, his rise became meteoric. He moved through national security posts with startling speed, first as a counterterrorism aide, then a senior advisor, and finally chief of staff at the Department of Defense in the waning weeks of the Trump presidency. Cameras found him often, and he welcomed them, projecting the confidence of a man convinced history had reserved him a starring role. In interviews, he adopted the cadence of a seasoned insider, sprinkling classified-sounding hints that suggested he knew more than he could say. Supporters thrilled to the bravado. Detractors saw a performer draped in the language of secrets. But bravado has a way of courting trouble. Patel's name surfaced repeatedly in controversies that swirled around intelligence briefings and the handling of sensitive information. Investigators and journalists alike came calling. When asked pointed questions, he rarely conceded ground. Instead, he countered with charm or cutting humor, turning tense interviews into sparring matches that drew clicks and ratings. To his fans, it was proof of toughness. To his critics, it was evasion polished to an art form. One exchange with a veteran reporter became near legend among Washington press corps. Pressed about conflicting statements he had made on a security breach, Patel smiled, leaned back, and said, "I don't recall the way you do, but maybe that's why I'm sitting here and you're asking the questions." The remark ricocheted through social media, half admiring the swagger, half appalled by the contempt. It was pure Patel, unruffled, dismissive, a man who believed he could out-talk any challenge. That belief only deepened after leaving government. Freed from official constraints, Patel embraced the role of political warrior. He toured conservative media circuits, speaking with the easy confidence of someone convinced the spotlight belonged to him. Podcasts, rallies, late-night appearances, each offered a stage to repeat his greatest hits, accusations of deep state plots, claims of hidden truths only he could reveal. The more controversy he stirred, the more invitations followed. His followers celebrated him as a truth-teller, a man willing to say the unsayable. To them, the smirk and the shrug were proof that he played by his own rules. But each victory carried a shadow. investigative reporters continued to sift through records, highlighting discrepancies between Patel's bold assertions and the documented facts. Former colleagues whispered about meetings where he overplayed his hand, promising results he couldn't deliver. Court filings occasionally contradicted his televised confidence. Still, he brushed it off, counting on charisma to outshine paper trails. That overconfidence trailed him in the very hearing where Jasmine Crockett waited. He arrived like a seasoned performer entering a familiar arena, nodding to cameras, adjusting cufflinks with a casual flick. To the untrained eye, it looked like command. To those who had tracked his career, it was the same pattern replaying. The charm of a man who believed no question could pin him down, no opponent could break his rhythm. But beneath the polish lay a simple truth. Swagger is a fragile shield. Years of glib dismissals and practiced deflections had left faint cracks, the kind that only a disciplined cross-examiner could widen. Crockett, a former civil rights attorney with a reputation for surgical questioning, had studied those cracks. She knew the stories, the contradictions, the moments when Patel's confidence outran the facts. And she understood what many in the chamber sensed. Bravado might deflect a headline, but it cannot withstand sustained, precise truth. The stage was set. Patel's history of smooth evasions and public bravado had brought him to this moment, certain he could charm or sidestep as always. He had faced reporters and prosecutors, dodged investigators and out-talked critics. But every overconfident player eventually meets the opponent they can't rattle. Before the cameras ever sought her out, Jasmine Crockett had already built a life defined by quiet defiance and unshakable purpose. She was raised in a working-class Texas neighborhood where community meant survival and dignity was treated as a daily discipline, not a luxury. Her father carried mail through blistering heat and sudden storms. Her mother tended patients on long night shifts, and together they taught their daughter that truth is worth the risk of speaking aloud. From the dinner table to the church pew, Jasmine absorbed a lesson that would become her foundation. You stand tall by standing honest. School revealed a mind both sharp and patient. When classmates sparred in noisy debates, Jasmine never shouted them down. She asked questions instead, slicing through bluster until only facts remained. Teachers began to notice that she disarmed bullies without raising her voice. Even then, she understood that composure could be its own kind of power. College tested that power. As a young black woman determined to study law, she faced professors who underestimated her and peers who assumed she would falter. Jasmine answered with relentless preparation. Case briefs filled her evenings. Outlines lined her dorm walls like quiet fortifications. "If I come prepared, they can't move me," she told a friend, a mantra she would carry into every arena of her future. After graduation, when lucrative corporate offers arrived, she chose the far tougher path of a civil rights attorney. Her clients were tenants evicted without cause, voters pushed from the rolls, families cornered by a justice system designed to exhaust them. Courtrooms became battlegrounds of fluorescent lights and stale coffee, where she converted pain into evidence and outrage into strategy. She won some cases, lost others, but always left her opponents facing the uncomfortable clarity of the record. Those years forged a lawyer's discipline and a fighter's heart. Jasmine learned that the surest rebuttal to intimidation was patience. Where adversaries blustered, she listened. Where they gambled on spectacle, she arrived with proof. Word spread. She was the attorney who would not flinch, the advocate who forced even seasoned power brokers to check their notes. Community organizers took notice and urged her toward public office. At first, she hesitated. Politics, she thought, rewarded performance over substance. But she saw how laws could either cement injustice or dismantle it. If she wanted lasting change, the courtroom wasn't enough. So she ran for the Texas House, a first-time candidate with a grassroots campaign powered by block parties and late-night door knocks. Volunteers remember her shoes scuffed from miles of pavement, her voice hoarse but steady as she promised neighbors not miracles, but representation. She won and quickly proved she was no ceremonial figure. In the legislature, she championed voting rights and criminal justice reform, standing firm when lobbyists and seasoned politicians tried to sideline her. Opponents attempted to shout her down on the chamber floor. She answered with calm precision, letting facts, and a well-timed pause, do the cutting. Reporters asked how she stayed so composed. She said, "Preparation is peace," simply. Her move to Congress only magnified that reputation. Jasmine arrived not with theatrics, but with binders of research and a talent for exposing contradictions without a raised voice. Constituents who had long felt ignored saw in her a representative who valued substance over sound bites. She earned allies across the aisle for her meticulous questions and earned the frustration of those who relied on chaos to win headlines. The backlash came anyway. Online trolls targeted her race and gender. Cable pundits dismissed her as too calm for the modern spectacle of politics. But Jasmine recognized the strategy behind the insults. "They want the show," she told a mentor. "I'll give them the facts." It became both shield and sword, a vow to stay rooted no matter how wild the storm. Through every challenge, dignity remained her defining strength. To Jasmine, respect was more than courtesy. It was strategy, a refusal to let arrogance set the terms of engagement. The lesson first learned at her parents' table, stand honest, stand tall, now guided her through the marbled halls of Washington. So when the invitation arrived to question Kash Patel, she approached it as she always did, quietly, methodically, ready. She knew his public bravado, his history of evasions, the way he turned hearings into theater. She also knew that truth, delivered with unshakable calm, could cut through spectacle like a blade. In the days before the hearing, messages poured in from supporters, neighbors from Texas, former clients, young lawyers who saw in her a map for their own ambitions. "Show them," one text read. She replied with her trademark brevity, "I'll show the facts." On the morning of the clash, Patel basked in camera flashes, feeding off the hum of expectation. Jasmine sat at the committee table, hands folded over her notes, the same quiet presence that had disarmed opponents for years. She had walked harder roads, faced sharper attacks, and carried heavier hopes. This was not a performance. It was simply the next step in a life built on preparation and unshakable truth. And when their paths finally crossed, destiny sharpened into a single flashpoint.
The hearing room pulsed with a restless energy, cameras whirring as if they could sense the collision about to unfold. Kash Patel leaned forward in his chair, that trademark half-smirk fixed like armor. He had sparred with committees before and wore the confidence of a man convinced he could turn any proceeding into his stage. Representative Jasmine Crockett waited, expression steady, notes aligned with meticulous care. She had been silent through Patel's opening flourish, letting him paint himself into the spotlight. He spoke of witch hunts and political theater, voice rising just enough to draw murmurs from the back rows. Each sentence felt designed to provoke, to lure his questioner into a duel of volume. When her turn came, Crockett began with a measured cadence that contrasted sharply with Patel's swagger. "Mr. Patel," she said, eyes never leaving his, "for the record, please confirm the dates of your tenure at the National Security Council." The question was simple, factual, yet Patel tilted his head, grinning as though she had offered him a punchline. "Congresswoman, I'm sure the committee already has that information. Maybe you should check your notes before asking something so basic." A ripple moved through the audience, a low hiss of whispers, a collective intake of breath. Crockett didn't flinch. She repeated the question, her tone a fraction firmer. The air tightened. Patel chuckled, leaning back. "Look, I know this is your moment for the cameras, but—" The gavel struck once, a sharp reminder from the chair. "The witness will answer the question." Still, Patel deflected, launching into a speech about partisan attacks, his voice gathering volume like a rising tide. Reporters scribbled, lenses zoomed, the crowd's murmurs grew, a mix of anticipation and disbelief. It was classic Patel. Drown the facts in spectacle, force the exchange onto his terrain. Crockett waited him out, her silence as deliberate as his theatrics were loud. When he finally paused for breath, she spoke evenly. "Your reluctance to state a simple date is noted. Let's move forward." The subtle dismissal pricked. Patel sat forward again, eyebrows arched. "Noted? Congresswoman, maybe you don't understand how national security works. Perhaps if you'd served in a real intelligence role." Another gavel strike. "Mr. Patel, direct your comments to the question." The temperature in the room seemed to rise. Patel's voice sharpened. "Fine, but let's not pretend this is about truth. This is a show trial." For the first time, Crockett allowed a thin smile. "The only show here," she replied, "is your refusal to answer straightforward questions." Gasps fluttered across the gallery. Patel blinked, momentarily caught off guard, then launched into another monologue about political persecution. Yet each sentence betrayed a faint edge, an impatience that signaled her calm was getting under his skin. She pressed on, question after question, each one a quiet trap built on the last. Dates, documents, conflicting statements from his previous interviews, she laid them out with surgical precision. Patel's responses grew louder but less precise, the smirk beginning to falter. Viewers watching live could feel the imbalance shift. The louder he grew, the more commanding her quiet became. A journalist in the front row later described the moment as a slow tightening of the vice. Every time Patel dodged, Crockett tightened her focus. Every deflection made his confidence look thinner, more performative. The committee room, once a neutral stage, began to feel like her courtroom. When she asked about a specific memo contradicting her earlier testimony, Patel snapped. "This is ridiculous," he barked, gesturing toward the cameras. "You people are chasing ghosts." The crowd reacted, a collective murmur, some startled laughter. Crockett didn't raise her voice. "It's only ridiculous if the facts aren't on your side," she said, steady as stone. For a heartbeat, the room stilled. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Patel shifted in his chair, searching for his usual footing but found none. The tension was electric, a coil drawn tight, every spectator aware that something irreversible was about to happen. She glanced at her notes once more, then looked directly at him. Her eyes carried the weight of every courtroom she'd ever commanded, every late night spent mastering the details no opponent could outrun. The gallery sensed it too. Conversations hushed to a tremor. This was the precipice. Then, in a heartbeat, she delivered the line that froze the room.
The tension had stretched to a fine wire, every ear in the chamber tuned to the quiet authority in Jasmine Crockett's voice. She held Patel's gaze, unhurried, as though she had all the time in the world. Then, with a calm that felt almost surgical, she delivered the words that would detonate across the country. "Mr. Patel," she said, her tone measured and unwavering, "when you dodge the truth this many times, it stops looking like confusion and starts looking like contempt for the people you claim to serve." The sentence sliced through the air like a bell at midnight. For a heartbeat, the room was silent, a vacuum where even the hum of the cameras seemed to disappear. Patel's confident posture collapsed an inch. He blinked rapidly, mouth parting as if to form a reply, but nothing came. The audience felt the shift immediately. You could hear the sharp intake of breath, the whispered, "Did she just?" before the sound swelled into a chorus of gasps. Somewhere in the back, a muffled "Yes!" escaped a spectator who forgot the rules of decorum. The gavel struck once, but the echo was drowned by the rising murmur, the unmistakable electricity of a crowd that knew it had witnessed something irreversible. Patel shifted in his seat, eyes darting from Crockett to the committee chair, to the cameras, then back again. His trademark smirk flickered, faltered, disappeared. He reached for his water glass, fingers trembling just enough for the front row to notice. Reporters scribbled furiously. One staffer behind Crockett allowed the faintest grin, quickly hidden behind a legal pad. Crockett didn't gloat. She simply held his gaze, letting the silence do the work her words had begun. It was a silence heavy with implication, the case against spectacle, the quiet triumph of fact over bluster. Patel opened his mouth again, perhaps searching for the familiar refuge of a counterpunch, but the moment had already swallowed him whole. The room seemed to exhale all at once. A low cheer rippled from the gallery, quickly hushed by security, but impossible to fully contain. Even members of the committee who rarely agreed on anything exchanged startled looks, eyebrows raised as if to say, "Did we just see that?" In the hallway outside, reporters dashed for phones. Within seconds, live tweet threads lit up. At Capitol Watch, Crockett just eviscerated Patel, the line of the year, clip coming. At Justice Now, when you dodge the truth this many times, starts looking like contempt, fur, hashtag Crockett mic drop. Producers in newsrooms across the country clipped the video before Patel had even found his footing. Cable networks interrupted programming with the replay, each angle capturing the precise moment his confidence cracked. Inside the chamber, the chair cleared her throat, trying to restore order, but even she couldn't hide a flicker of awe. Patel finally managed a response, a thin attempted dismissal. "I disagree with the Congresswoman's characterization," he stammered, but the words landed like pebbles after an earthquake. The damage was done. Crockett leaned slightly forward, her voice as even as it had been all morning. "The record will reflect your disagreement," she said, and nothing more. She didn't need to. The cameras caught Patel blinking, grasping for a thread of his former bravado. The silence following his half-hearted protest was deafening. He shifted his papers, cleared his throat, and avoided her eyes. Outside the committee room, the digital wildfire raged. TikTok feeds filled with side-by-side reactions, students in dorm rooms, veterans in living rooms, parents at kitchen tables, each replaying the line with captions like "Truth vs. Spin" and "Dignity wins." Memes sprouted in real time, a still shot of Patel mid-blink with the caption "Contempt detected," another of Crockett with a glowing crown of text reading "Preparation is peace." Journalists hustled to stake their commentary. A prominent columnist tweeted, "We just witnessed the new gold standard for congressional questioning. Crockett turned calm into a weapon." Cable anchors called it a masterclass in accountability and the moment that defines this session of Congress. Back in the chamber, the chair cleared her throat, trying to restore order, but even she couldn't hide a flicker of awe. Patel finally managed a response, a thin attempt at dismissal. "I disagree with the Congresswoman's characterization." But the words landed like pebbles after an earthquake. The damage was done. Crockett leaned slightly forward, her voice as even as it had been all morning. "The record will reflect your disagreement," she said, and nothing more. She didn't need to. The cameras caught Patel blinking, grasping for a thread of his former bravado. The silence following his half-hearted protest was deafening. He shifted his papers, cleared his throat, and avoided her eyes. Outside the committee room, the digital wildfire raged. TikTok feeds filled with side-by-side reactions, students in dorm rooms, veterans in living rooms, parents at kitchen tables, each replaying the line with captions like "Truth vs. Spin" and "Dignity wins." Memes sprouted in real time, a still shot of Patel mid-blink with the caption "Contempt detected," another of Crockett with a glowing crown of text reading "Preparation is peace." Journalists hustled to stake their commentary. A prominent columnist tweeted, "We just witnessed the new gold standard for congressional questioning. Crockett turned calm into a weapon." Cable anchors called it a masterclass in accountability and the moment that defines this session of Congress.
Back in the chamber, the chair cleared her throat, trying to restore order, but even she couldn't hide a flicker of awe. Patel finally managed to respond, a thin attempt at dismissal. I disagree with the Congresswoman's characterization, but the words landed like pebbles after an earthquake. The damage was done. Crockett leaned slightly forward, her voice as even as it had been all morning. "The record will reflect your disagreement," she said, and nothing more. She didn't need to. The cameras caught Patel blinking, grasping for a thread of his former bravado. The silence following his half-hearted protest was deafening. He shifted his papers, cleared his throat, and avoided her eyes. Outside the committee room, the digital wildfire raged. TikTok feeds filled with side-by-side reactions, students in dorm rooms, veterans in living rooms, parents at kitchen tables, each replaying the line with captions like "Truth vs. Spin" and "Dignity wins." Memes sprouted in real time, a still shot of Patel mid-blink with the caption "Contempt detected," another of Crockett with a glowing crown of text reading "Preparation is peace." Journalists hustled to stake their commentary. A prominent columnist tweeted, "We just witnessed the new gold standard for congressional questioning. Crockett turned calm into a weapon." Cable anchors called it a masterclass in accountability and the moment that defines this session of Congress. Back in the chamber, the chair cleared her throat, trying to restore order, but even she couldn't hide a flicker of awe. Patel finally managed a response, a thin attempt at dismissal. I disagree with the Congresswoman's characterization, but the words landed like pebbles after an earthquake. The damage was done. Crockett leaned slightly forward, her voice as even as it had been all morning. "The record will reflect your disagreement," she said, and nothing more. She didn't need to. The cameras caught Patel blinking, grasping for a thread of his former bravado. The silence following his half-hearted protest was deafening. He shifted his papers, cleared his throat, and avoided her eyes. Outside the committee room, the digital wildfire raged. TikTok feeds filled with side-by-side reactions, students in dorm rooms, veterans in living rooms, parents at kitchen tables, each replaying the line with captions like "Truth vs. Spin" and "Dignity wins." Memes sprouted in real time. A still shot of Patel mid-blink with the caption "Contempt detected," another of Crockett with a glowing crown of text reading "Preparation is peace." Journalists hustled to stake their commentary. A prominent columnist tweeted, "We just witnessed the new gold standard for congressional questioning. Crockett turned calm into a weapon." Cable anchors called it a masterclass in accountability and the moment that defines this session of Congress. Back in the chamber, the chair cleared her throat, trying to restore order, but even she couldn't hide a flicker of awe. Patel finally managed a response, a thin attempt at dismissal. I disagree with the Congresswoman's characterization. But the words landed like pebbles after an earthquake. The damage was done. Crockett leaned slightly forward, her voice as even as it had been all morning. "The record will reflect your disagreement," she said, and nothing more. She didn't need to. The cameras caught Patel blinking, grasping for a thread of his former bravado. The silence following his half-hearted protest was deafening. He shifted his papers, cleared his throat, and avoided her eyes. Outside the committee room, the digital wildfire raged. TikTok feeds filled with side-by-side reactions, students in dorm rooms, veterans in living rooms, parents at kitchen tables.
The committee room emptied, but the moment refused to fade. Outside, reporters swarmed the marble hallway like a tide, phones aloft, voices urgent. Within minutes, the single sentence Jasmine Crockett had delivered with surgical calm was already bouncing from newsroom to newsroom, each outlet racing to replay the clip before competitors could post their own angle. Cable networks cut into scheduled programming. Anchors who had spent the morning droning through budget updates now spoke with barely contained excitement. "We interrupt our broadcast for breaking political drama," one announced, as the screen filled with Crockett's poised face and Kash Patel's stunned expression. The line played again, then again in slow motion, a nation collectively leaning closer each time. On Twitter, now simply called X, the hashtag Crockett Mic Drop surged to the top of the trending list within 20 minutes. Right beneath it came Truth Over Noise and Contempt for the People, each tag carrying thousands of retweets per minute. Journalists live tweeted the replay, activists clipped it into 30-second bursts, and amateur editors overlaid the quote with dramatic music that turned the exchange into instant political theater. TikTok proved even faster. Teenagers in dorm rooms and retirees in kitchens filmed themselves mouthing Crockett's line with triumphant gestures. Some videos racked up hundreds of thousands of likes before Patel had even left the building. One clip simply showed a woman staring into the camera in silence after the punchline, eyes wide, before whispering, "Iconic." Celebrity reactions poured in like a second wave. An Oscar-winning actor posted the clip with a single word, "Masterclass." A Grammy-winning singer wrote, "Preparation is peace. Representative Crockett just schooled us all." By nightfall, professional athletes, best-selling authors, and Hollywood directors had joined the chorus. Their comments united progressive activists and apolitical fans in rare agreement. Political analysts worked overtime to explain why this single moment landed so hard. Some credited the precision of Crockett's phrasing, others the quiet dignity of her delivery. "It's not just what she said, it's that she said it without breaking a sweat while Patel unraveled," one cable commentator argued. Another added, "We're witnessing the return of substantive accountability, and it feels revolutionary." Public opinion shifted in real time. Overnight polls showed a sudden spike in favorability for Crockett among independents and even moderate conservatives. Call-in radio shows overflowed with listeners marveling at how a soft-spoken line could feel more forceful than any shouting match. One caller summed up the mood. "She reminded us that truth doesn't need a megaphone, it just needs courage." In communities far from Washington, the moment became a kind of shared celebration. At a cafe in Dallas, patrons watched the replay on a wall-mounted screen and burst into spontaneous applause. In Chicago, a group of law students paused their late-night study session to dissect the legal strategy behind her questioning. Social media brimmed with selfies of people holding homemade signs, "Facts outlast fury," and "Dignity wins." Even late-night comedians, often the arbiters of cultural resonance, devoted entire opening monologues to the takedown. One host quipped, "Patel came for a fight and left with a vocabulary lesson, contempt for the people you claim to serve." Ouch. Studio audiences roared, clips from those shows adding another layer to the viral cascade. Inside Crockett's own district, constituents organized impromptu watch parties, replaying the exchange on projectors in community centers and backyards. Elders nodded with quiet pride. Children repeated the line with the seriousness of a pledge. For many immigrant families, her calm defiance felt personal, a validation that preparation and dignity could still prevail in a system that too often rewarded chaos. Meanwhile, Patel's team scrambled. Anonymous aides leaked to the press that he felt ambushed, though the hearing schedule had been public for weeks. His half-hearted attempts at damage control, an evening interview dismissing the incident as political theater, only fueled the frenzy. Comment sections filled with rebuttals. "The only theater was your dodge," one user wrote, racking up thousands of likes. By the next morning, the clip had amassed tens of millions of views across platforms. Newsstands carried headlines like "Crockett's Calm Shakes Capitol" and "The Sentence Heard Around the World." Editorial boards praised her discipline, contrasting it with Patel's bluster. A respected national columnist declared, "In an era of endless shouting, Representative Crockett reminded America that quiet authority can still command the room." Yet, through the whirlwind, Crockett herself remained characteristically composed. She issued a brief statement thanking constituents for their support and emphasizing the importance of factual inquiry. "Yesterday was about accountability. That work continues," she wrote. No victory lap, no grandstanding, just a steady commitment to the principles that had carried her from Texas neighborhoods to the national stage. Commentators quickly noted that her restraint only amplified the impact. She doesn't chase the spotlight. That's why it finds her. Long after the headlines cooled and the hashtag scrolled out of view, Jasmine Crockett's quiet triumph lingered in the nation's imagination. For those who watched the clip again and again, the appeal wasn't simply the precision of her words or the spectacle of a powerful man left speechless. It was something more enduring, the reminder that calm courage defeats bluster, and that truth, prepared, patient, and unshaken, will always outlast noise. In interviews the next day, Crockett refused to bask in the attention. The facts spoke for themselves, she said, a statement so understated it felt almost radical in a culture addicted to victory laps. She reminded listeners that her job was to ask questions, to keep the public record clear, to serve the people who trusted her with their voices. It was a lesson both old and urgent. Democracy survives not through shouting matches, but through steady stewardship. Commentators from across the spectrum noted the symbolism. In an era when politics can feel like a constant contest of decibels, Crockett showed that dignity is its own kind of force. She never raised her voice. She never matched Patel's interruptions with her own. Instead, she embodied a truth many had nearly forgotten, that real strength is not in domination, but in discipline. Watching her, millions sensed that the virtues they were taught as children, preparation, patience, and respect, still have power in the public square. Her approach offered a blueprint for more than politics. Teachers replayed the clip in classrooms, encouraging students to see how composure can command attention more effectively than shouting. Community leaders quoted her in workshops on conflict resolution. Parents told their kids that Jasmine's example was proof that you don't need to be the loudest to be heard. Crockett herself connected the dots in a speech to constituents a week later. "I've spent my career believing that dignity is not weakness, it's strength. It's the refusal to let someone else's arrogance decide your worth. And preparation, being ready when the moment calls, that's how truth wins." Her words resonated not just as political commentary, but as a call to personal action. Viewers who had felt powerless in their own workplaces, families, or communities took the message to heart. Social media filled with personal stories, a nurse who calmly confronted a hospital administrator about unsafe conditions, a student who stood firm in a heated debate without resorting to insults, a father who spoke up at a town meeting after years of staying silent. Each credited the hearing clip as a reminder that integrity can be practiced anywhere. The incident also reframed how many Americans viewed leadership. Too often they said charisma is confused with chaos and force with effectiveness. Crockett's performance illuminated another path, that leadership rooted in preparation and humility can cut deeper than the loudest spectacle. One editorial put it simply, "She showed us that facts need no flourish when carried with dignity." Even Patel's allies grudgingly admitted the power of the moment. Off the record, one aide conceded, "She didn't just win the exchange, she shifted the standard." That acknowledgement underscored a larger truth. When integrity is this visible, it becomes harder to ignore. For Crockett, the event became less about a single viral line and more about the responsibility it symbolized. Every one of us, she told a local radio host, has moments where we choose between ego and evidence, between posturing and principle. If my example helps someone else choose principle, then the clip served its purpose. The resonance lay not in spectacle, but in invitation. Her calm invited others to believe that they too could face arrogance without becoming it, that they could stand for what's right without shouting, and that careful preparation is still the surest shield against deceit. And as the cheers fade, one final message remains. Dignity is not merely a posture for special occasions, it is a daily practice. It's how ordinary people defend truth at school board meetings, in workplace negotiations, at family tables where hard conversations unfold. Crockett's moment on Capitol Hill was dramatic, yes, but its real power is quiet and personal. It whispers to anyone watching that preparation is peace, that integrity is strength, and that the courage to stay composed can change more than a single hearing. One line. That's all it took for Jasmine Crockett to turn a heated hearing into a masterclass in calm authority. A single sentence now echoing around the world. You felt it the moment it landed, the sharp intake of breath, the stunned silence, the sudden roar. This wasn't just a debate. It was proof that preparation and dignity can cut through even the thickest fog of bluster. If that moment stirred something in you, if it reminded you that facts still matter and composure still conquers, don't let the feeling fade. Share this story with friends who crave more than empty shouting. Send it to anyone who doubts the truth can still win. Add your voice to the chorus demanding leaders who value integrity over volume. Subscribe to this channel for more fearless political storytelling where we highlight those who refuse to bow to arrogance and instead let evidence speak. Each video is crafted to keep you informed, inspired, and ready to stand tall in your own life's confrontations. Your engagement matters. Every like, every comment, every share helps amplify the message that dignity is not weakness, it's strength. Together, we can make these moments more than fleeting clips. We can make them a movement. So hit that like button, leave your thoughts below, and subscribe for the next chapter of truth-telling. Because when facts meet fury, only one endures. Facts outlast fury. Dignity wins the day.